Warm colors in general create excitement. In the image, the warm colors are also complemented by a blue light. Blue symbolizes trust, loyalty, and confidence. This interlinks with the warm colors ideology and strengthens the non-coded iconic message. The non-coded iconic message makes up the literal visual interpretation of the image. This message differs greatly from the symbolism that we receive from the coded iconic message because of the fact that it is a literal interpretation. It also removes a lot of emotion from the image and keeps the image real, so to speak. These 5 signs require general cultural knowledge, and refer back to signified, each of which is global. For example, sex sales, imbued with euphoric values. The meaning of imbued is to inspire or influence thoroughly. A euphoric value was covered earlier on in the text. So imbued with euphoric values would mean to influence a feeling of happiness. If we removed all the signs from the image, we are still left with a particular informational subject, deprived of all knowledge. I continue to read the image, to understand that it assembles in a common space a number of identifiable objects, not merely shapes and colors. The signified of the third message are constituted by the real objects in the scene, meaning they are put together to form a whole. The photograph involves a certain arrangement of the scene, perspective, framing, reduction, flattening, very similar to Barth's bands in the ad. In order to fully deconstruct this advert, I believe we need a balance of cultural knowledge and our own perception. Alcohol leads to intoxication and sex sales. We need to know what an image is and what alcohol, drugs, and sex are, but it is a matter of an almost anthropological knowledge. Anthropological meaning the scientific study of the origin, the behavior, and the physical, social, and cultural development of humans. A culture has social norms, tied to its social values, act as rules for judging what is socially appropriate and acceptable. As such, they influence reactions to persuasive communications. Saatchi and Saatchi understood the brand values. A key selling point in advertising is sex, and based on the Western cultural values, I believe they created the perfect ad, from the censored innuendos based on the body language, gestures, positions of the figures to the colors used to seduce the viewer's attention. I chose this specific ad, not just because it is interesting but also because I generally believe it displays a great deal of persuasion through design.
Conclusion. I will now sum up the 3 chapters and discuss my main points. In Chapter 1 I explained my reasons for exploring the chosen topic and outlined my goals. The main points I gathered from this chapter was my reason for the chosen topic. I outlined the question clearly and planned out the journey I would embark on throughout the dissertation. I planned the beginning, middle to the end. This structure helped me and assisted me in what to write so I would stay on the right track. Chapter 1 helped me to move on to Chapter 2 knowing where I wanted to take it and what I would discuss. I got to explain why it is important for a designer to learn about persuasion and semiotics and how useful it is in the industry. Books such as The Art of Color by Johannes Itten helped me understand color theory and how to recognize its use in advertising. I also got to study Ranks schema and learned about 2 basic and opposite patterns of persuasion, intensify and downplay. This was extremely useful and at this point strengthened my interest in the subject. I got to introduce the advertisement I would later analyze and speak briefly about what my plans were. The Coding Advertisements by Judith Williamson helped to introduce me to semiotics and gave me a feel of its depth. Persuasion in Advertising by John O'Shaughnessy and Nicholas Jackson. O'Shaughnessy was one of the most interesting books I found. I learned many different tactics of persuasion, how it can be applied and read. I looked at Elements of Semiology, a book by Roland Barthes. This explored semiotics in detail and helped me to understand some of the terminology. The last thing I achieved from Chapter 1 was introducing the key text of semiology, Roland Barthes' Rhetoric of the Image, Pans and the Advertisement. With this in mind, I was ready to move on to the next chapter with a clear mind on the next steps I would have to take. I began Chapter 2 by doing brief researching on the history of semiotics. I found interesting theories from Aristotle and Plato and learned semiotics is a lot older than I originally thought. After exploring the history of semiotics, I decided to define all the key terminology I may come across. In order to achieve this, I referred back to a range of sources. I found this very educational and at times challenging, but managed to get through it due to my plan in Chapter 1. When I had the key terminology down, I was ready to move on. During my research, I came across an interesting article by Robert M. Seiler, where he outlined key activities analysts undertake when they conduct a semiological critique. If I was to mention anything about Chapter 2, it would be this. I found this article very informing, and it helped me to visualize semiotics clearer and gave me better understanding of how to critique my own work. The main point of Chapter 2 was to explore semiotics and have a strong enough knowledge of it to move on to the final analysis.
At the end of Chapter 2, I once again mentioned the ad I was building up to, Club 18 to 30 Club Illusion ad. With Chapter 1 and 2 combined, I now had the knowledge and structure to tackle Chapter 3. Chapter 3 begins with the background of the ad by Saatchi and Saatchi. At this point, I am making it clear for the viewer who the company is and what they stand for. This is useful as it helps you to understand why Saatchi and Saatchi created such an ad campaign for them. I then go on to speak about the brand's history, and one of the main points is that the company's brand values is aimed at youth in the Western culture, as that is where the company is situated. I then go on to talk about the sales and the awards the company won for the shocking 2002 ad campaign. This can be linked to the book Persuasion in Advertising, in that they talk about shock tactics and how they generate mass appeal. I then mention the fact that I will be using Roland Barthes' bands in the ad as a guideline, and explain that I will be deconstructing the ad with additional help from the key terminology I learned in Chapter 2. This exercise became very enlightening and helped me to think critically and form objective views from a semiotician's view. This is beneficial for any designer working in the industry. To sum up this ad, the main points I gathered were that Saatchi and Saatchi used their cultural knowledge